Hello and welcome. This is Barrett from the C4 Cyber Club here at Cypress College. And in this lab today, we're going to cover the CySA Plus lab series, log analysis with bash scripting. So in a previous lab, we worked on just setting up the syslog servers. We kind of talked about the basics of log analysis, but here we're going to do a little bit more deep dive into actually parsing through logs, and you could see how you can use the Linux command line and commands like cut and using the pipe command to send output into another command so that you could search a little bit more detailed manner, find only what you're looking for, right? So that's what we're going to look at here. Not really too in-depth scripts. They're basically just going to be one-line commands. But they can get quite complex as you start to add various sorting techniques and things like that. So we'll get towards that at the end of the lab. But first, we're going to just examine an Apache web server log. We're going to create some normal connections by just visiting the website, for example. And then we're going to create abnormal connections using like a vulnerability scanner, like OWASP ZAP, for example. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into it. I've already got logged into my machines. Remember, if you're following along on page 5, you can get logged in to the machines that we'll be using. All right, so we're going to start on the Ubuntu machine. And we're going to launch terminal. Make this a little bit bigger. There we go. Okay, so back to cd var log. So remember, this is a very common location, the main location for log files in Linux. And also there's a folder in there for Apache web server. That is Apache 2. So once we're in here, if we do ls, you see, okay, we have a bunch of error logs here, but we also have access log. So this is what is created whenever any connections are made to the web server itself. And if we take a look at that, we could run cat access.log, and it looks like currently that is empty. But it does look like there is a backup or a previous log. So remember, in the previous lab, we talked about log rotation. So maybe this was a previous week's log, and it got saved as .1. So if we do cat access.log.1, okay, now we notice a whole bunch of entries, and it's all coming from the .3, which is the Kali machine. Okay, so this, who knows if this was malicious or not, but we can see the host that made a connection and also the dates or timestamp. And if you look through the lab here, it does give a much more detailed view of what each of these fields represents. So I would definitely recommend reading through this as well. But as you can see, a lot of this is blank, so we're gonna generate our own normal content, and I think it'll be a nice, much nicer example. Okay, so we know that the access log is currently empty, but let's pretend it's not. So let's say we're wanting to sit down and isolate traffic that we particularly want to watch. So we might want to clear that log. So to do that, we would want to be root. So we could type sudo su. It's going to ask us for the password for our Ubuntu login, which is password 123. And you notice that this just goes ahead and takes us to the root level. And we can go ahead and clear this just by adding in blank basically, so within these double quotes, it's basically the same thing as okay, I just want to write in a one blank space, right? And then we're going to redirect that to var log apache2, and then the file name access.log. Okay, so the printf command, it's very similar to echo as well. Okay, so that takes care of that. We cleared the access log file. We know that we're starting from a fresh file, and now we're going to generate some traffic to it, and then we can take a look at that. So let's move over to the Win client. We'll just launch Firefox. And all we're going to do here is simply visit the Ubuntu's web server. So it's a .4 here, 192.168.1.4. We notice it's a very, very simple website. I guess you can call it a website. It's just a basic HTML file, right? Has some links to different pages. Now, if we come back to Ubuntu, now this is where we're going to start to get into what's called bash scripting. And like I said, all of these commands are essentially one-liners, but you'll see how you can start to chain different commands together to find more detailed information, right? Because right now, if we just said cat access.log, I'm not going to type out that entire path, because if you've been following along with me, you should be in the Apache2 folder. If you're not, then you would want to type out, like it is in the lab, that full absolute path, or you could just cd into this folder like I am as well. So just wanted to point that out, that my commands here are slightly simpler than over here. But remember, if we just cat this out, the cat, or short for concatenate command, just prints the file's output to the terminal. You can see we have 3 lines. So this would be 1 line, this would be 1 line, and then this is a 3rd line. Okay, so we have the host IP, we have a timestamp, we have the description of the HTTP request. This looks like it was a 404 response. So the HTTP response code was 404, or not found. This one here was 200, which is okay. So this was probably getting the HTML file. This was looking for the fave icon.ico, which not all websites have them, but if they had it configured, it would just be, you've probably seen it when you visit a URL and there's a little tiny graphical icon. So in this case, this didn't exist, because remember, it's a very simple page, right? So if there was an icon, it would be displayed up top here. But because that's not there, we requested it. We sent a GET request, but it wasn't there, which is why we got it in HTTP response code of 404, which means not found. Okay, so that's general basics of what this access log is showing. Now let's take this command, cat access.log. Let's use the pipe command, which essentially sends the output of this command into whatever command comes next. And so we're going to do wc for word count -l. So this is going to tell us how many lines are in this log. So remember, we counted manually before, and I pointed them out. So we said we had 3. But if you ever wanted to know how many lines do I have in this log file before even looking at it, this is where this command comes in handy. And this may be your first foray into bash scripting, but that is a script, essentially. It can be as simple as that. Okay, so moving on, let's generate a little bit more information into this log. So we'll go back to the Win client. Let's just go ahead and click on page 1. Okay, we see an image loaded. So we're probably going to see a response of 200 for the image loading, probably another response 200 for the HTML file loaded, right? So it's page1.html. Let's go back to Ubuntu. But let's go ahead and rerun that last command. So let's see how many lines have been added. Okay, that makes sense, right? Requests for the HTML file and requests for the image. Because this is such a bare bones website, it's kind of easy to kind of look at it in that way. Most websites, you're requesting tons. You're getting tons of images and all kinds of information. And then if we just do cat access.log without the line count, and then yes, here we are. So response code 200, okay, for the HTML file, response code 200 for the image. And the lab outlines that as well here. Okay, so those were normal connections. That is just from a standard user browsing the website. Okay, so let's move over to Kali. Let's create some abnormal or unhealthy connections, as the lab puts it. So we're going to go to applications, web application analysis, and we'll run OWASP zap, which we have worked on in previous labs. So this, remember, OWASP zap or Z attack, this is a web application vulnerability scanner. We'll just go ahead and run a quick scan 192.168.1.4. We'll just go ahead and press attack. We can also move this up, get a little better look. So you see tons of GET requests right now. So you can imagine this log file is becoming large very quickly. We're already to 1,400 requests. Okay, so that's complete. We move back to active scan. Okay, we had 1,531 requests. So back to Ubuntu, I'm going to press up 2 times. How many lines? Well, we have 1,549 lines now. And if I cat that out without, let's just look at the whole log file, you can see, yeah, quite a lot. Quite a lot of information here. And if you're looking at this manually like this, you might be noticing, okay, wow, there's a lot of requests from this IP address. And you might be looking at the timestamp and saying, this is all happening very quickly, right? So, I wonder if somebody is doing a scan. So that takes us to the last part of the lab. And this is where we really get into diving deeper into the scripting. So let's take a look at this first command here. I'm going to go ahead and clear the screen. So cat access.log, this always comes first. We're essentially creating that output, but here we're always going to pipe that into another command. And actually, you know what? Let me cat that out just so you can look at this, because this this cut command, essentially what this is doing, this -d is setting what's called a delimiter. And here we can specify anything. So whatever comes within these double quotes is the delimiter. And this refers to one log entry. So you could change this to anything you want, but in this particular command, what we're doing, we're setting a delimiter to be a blank space. So that means any time you see a blank space here, it creates a new field. So even here will be a new field, here will be a new field, etc. So we set the delimiter with the -d, double quotes with a blank space. Now with a -f, we say we want field number 1, which is going to be the IP address. Okay. So a reminder of what's happening. We're running this full command. We're piping it or sending it into the cut command. And we're setting these specific options. We're saying I want a delimiter of a blank space, and I want to select only field 1. Okay, but we're not done there. We're going to sort this. And then finally, based on the sorting, we're going to get the line count. And this sort-u, this is sorting only by unique entries. So you notice how there's tons of these .3s, IP addresses, but we're going to cut out anything extra. We're only going to select the unique entry. Okay. And then finally, we pipe that to word count to get the list, how many lines, how many unique fields are there. So when I press enter, you notice we get very little output, right? But it's very detailed. We know that there are 2 IP addresses in this log. Now let's change it up a little bit. I'm going to press the up arrow. Let's remove the word count command. And now it will actually list out sorted and unique field 1. Okay, now I'm going to press the up arrow again. The nice thing about this, a lot of times you can use the up arrow and just tweak these commands a little bit. But I'm going to move back. Okay, so we're only going to just sort in general. And we're going to pipe that to a command called uniq. Here we're getting sorting by unique entries, again, coming from the sort command. And we're going to pipe this into a final sort -n by numeric counts. Okay. So here we can see how many times did these IPs, how many times do they exist in this access.log. So we can notice that, wow, this .3 host has a lot of activity here. And remember, the .3 is coming from the Kali machine here. Now, what if we wanted to look at, we want to add the timestamps into our output. So we can go back to the cut command. And remember, right now we're selecting field 1. Well, if we want the timestamp, which is here, this would be field 2, this would be field 3, and now finally this would be field 4. So we could say -f1, 4. There we go. So what this is showing, because we cut out, we're choosing only unique values based on these fields, we noticed that a lot of things were happening very quickly. So we have multiple entries for very specific timestamps down to the second. But what it does is it doesn't display all of them, but it does tell us how many entries during those seconds there are. So even down at this timestamp, there were 224 requests, all within that second time frame. And the nice thing about honing in on particular timestamps is that as you correlate with other log entries, you're able to focus in on the time. So we know that pretty much all within this minute time frame, right? this is when a scan happened. So you're able to correlate with other log entries. This is why it's also super important in log analysis, log collection, to have your NTP server set up, network time protocol, port 123. You want to make sure that all of your systems are reporting correct timestamps. Okay, so moving on. So now we're going to switch up the delimiter a bit. So let me go ahead and clear screen. I'm going to cat access log again. So what if we want to pull the user agent strings? So the user agent relates to what type of web browser is making the connection. So you notice that, okay, Mozilla 5.0. So here we're going to use a delimiter of a double quote. So I'm going to pipe the cat access log into cut-d. Now, originally we included our delimiter within double quotes. Now, in this case, we want to actually use the double quote as the delimiter itself. So we can actually use the single quotes instead. So anything within the single quotes will be the delimiter. And so in this case, it is the double quote. And the field for that is going to be 6. And then we'll go ahead and sort that. We only want the unique entries. And then we're going to sort by how many times those occur. Okay. Press enter. So we notice that, okay, there were 1,543 connections using this particular browser. So Firefox 39. We had 5 from this version of Firefox. And then we had 1 from this one here. Now, what if we want to map IP addresses to this? Or we want to just find one very specific. So we're going to say, okay, there is quite a lot here. I need to figure out which IP this belongs to. So here we could use grep to search for a very particular string within the access log. And then we're going to pipe that into the cut command and do some sorting as well. So let's start with grep, and feel free to copy and paste. So we're looking for, and we need to put this within single quotes. So we're looking for, we're looking for this start one here. I'll keep following along with the lab. Okay, so I'm going to right click, copy, and then I'm going to go ahead and paste, right click, paste. I found on these NetLabs that's the easiest way to do an easy copy paste. Okay, so now we're grepping for that string within access.log. Now let's pipe that output over to the cut command again, cut-d. Let's set a delimiter for the space again. Field 1. And sort by unique. All right, so we see that is a .3, that is the Kali machine. Now we know what machine is responsible for this, and we've kind of done OS fingerprinting, kind of. We know which OS that IP is using. Okay, so now next, let's go ahead and I'm going to press up a couple times, pull that string, that command back up. Let's go down the list. So let's figure out what IP is using this user agent. So I'm going to copy, right click, copy that. And here you could press the home key to come to the start of that command. I'm going to arrow over, then I'm going to press delete. it's good to get the hang of how to edit these commands. Because you notice once you get into all these detailed bash scripting, you may not necessarily want to type it all out from scratch again, but there are ways to edit it once you get the hang of the commands. Okay, so within the single quotes here, I'm going to right click and let's go ahead and paste. Just make sure that that string that you pasted is between the two single quotes. Okay, and now here we can press enter. Okay, so this second one relates to the .5 IP. The first one, remember, this was the Kali machine, the .3. And now one more time, I'm going to press up. I'm going to select this last user agent, right click, copy. I'm going to press home, arrow over, delete the previous string. Okay, I have the two single quotes, right click, paste. They are in between the two single quotes, and let's press enter. All right, so this last one also comes from the .3 Kali machine. So as an analyst, you can see, okay, that's interesting. This is the majority of the Kali machine, but there's this one request where they appear to have spoofed their browser, which is very easy to do, very possible. And essentially we did that. That happened through OWASP-ZAP. So one of these requests, based on the type of scan that it does, it automatically spoofed the user agent details to make it appear to come from a different browser. There's actually really cool privacy browser extensions like that you can install in your Firefox that actually do that for you. And it's kind of a nice way to enhance your privacy as you browse the internet, so that websites can't track you as well using things like, okay, what version of web browser are you running, etc. All right, and so that concludes this lab. I know this is a lot, especially this combined with the other lab 6, working with log data. It's a lot of Linux commands. It almost feels like a Linux sysadmin kind of lab, right? Because you're learning about all these different command line commands, I should say. But knowing grep, knowing the cut command, very, very helpful when you're parsing through large amounts of not only logs, even just large files. If you get into doing CTFs, capture the flag activities, these two commands will very much come in handy. So that concludes this lab, log analysis with bash scripting. I hope you enjoyed, and catch you in the next one.